Hello, I'm Dr. Balasubramanian. Today I'm going to discuss how to set preferences in Scribus. Let us open the software by double clicking on the icon which is commonly placed in the desktop. Now the Scribus is opening. As soon as the window is opened, let me just create a page. Now, before you start working on Scribus, one should be familiar with all the preferences and setting. So where do you go and set your preferences? Now go to file and then there you get the preferences. But before you start working on preferences, you should remember that whatever settings you give out in the preferences will be carried out only in the subsequent documents. I repeat again, when what all settings you give out in preferences will be carried out only in subsequent documents. If you want to carry out these settings in the current document itself, you need to go to document setup. So now today we will go and explore what are the settings that can be changed under this preferences tab. So now I'm clicking preferences. So this is actually the preferences window. You have the following tabs on the left side. The first is the general tab. So general tab helps you to set the user interface. The user interface is actually the software tools and software space which you work with. That is actually the interface. So now there is a default language for user interface. So here everything is given out in English. Actually that is a default language for the software. Now if you feel like, you can always change the default software language for the software. That can be done by clicking the down arrow and choosing the language which is listed. So the default language can be changed. The default language is English and it can be changed to the choice of your own. Then next comes the theme. Theme is actually the layout of the software, where you see file, the menu, this is the menu bar, this is the toolbar. All these things belong to a theme. So now the default theme happens to be what you see here. So now you can have a Windows like theme. Then if you choose Windows like theme, the entire layout of Scribus more or less starts to resemble a Windows theme. And next comes the wheel jump. What exactly you mean by the wheel jump? So when you're working on a document, you have a central wheel in your mouse to scroll. So for each scroll, the software can be instructed to make a series of jumps. So supposing if you are scrolling with your mouse once, move the mouse wheel once, the default setting is 40 pixel. You can either increase or decrease this wheel jump value as per your convenience. You can decrease or increase. So supposing by default, when you scroll your scroll mouse once, the entire document moves by 40 pixel. And then next comes the recent document settings. So default is 5. What exactly you mean by recent document? For example, if you, I will cancel this window, then go to file, then open recent. So you see, when you go to file and open recent document, it shows you just 5 of the most recent documents you have been working on. You always have the choice of increasing this number. Suppose you give it a 10, it is going to show 10 recent documents which you are working on, so that you can choose and start working again. So this open recent tab will conform to the settings you give out in the preferences. So here by default the value is 5. So you can always increase this value to any value you are comfortable with. And then the next is show splash screen at the startup. Splash screen is nothing but the Scribus welcome screen which you view at the startup. Supposing if you are low on resources, if your software takes a long time to load, you can disable this show splash screen on startup, so that the software will load that much faster. And then the menu, this is actually the menu, file menu, edit menu, item menu, and so this is the menu. So what happens is the size of the font of the menus by default is 8 points. So you can increase the size of the font as per your convenience. And then palette is nothing but what you see here. everything, these are all palettes. So the size of the palettes again can be increased from the default 8 points. And then when you have created a text box or when you have created an image frame, when you want to resize it, so you hold the handle with the mouse and draw the handle so that the frame gets resized to the desired size. So when you pull the handle, the time taken for the frame to move or the movement to start can be set here. 150 milliseconds is the default. If you want, you can reduce it. If you want, you can increase it as per your convenience. Here, if you say use small widgets in palettes, so what happens is your palette window, it could be a font window, it could be a color palette. So if this palette, if you want to say smaller widget, this saves space. If you are using a smaller monitor, it always makes sense to optimize the space available for you. So if you check this box, it will show the palettes with the small widgets, and on clicking the widgets, the entire palette will become visible. Then here, this is the path of the document, where this is the path inside a system where the document in which you're working, if you give a save, it's going to be saved. So by default, all your documents will be saved in the documents folder. Then if you have enabled color, that we will see here, if you have enabled color, it gives the option of which ICC profile you want to give out to. And then next, this entire software can take scripts. It can take Python scripts commonly, the scripts which are included in Scribus or which Scribus is compatible with is commonly is the Python. So you can show the script folder by give a change and give out the script folder. And then if you have downloaded any document templates from the web, or if you have yourself designed document template, you can save it in a folder and then show the document template here. You can change the document template by going to the directory where you have saved the template, and this template will be carried out from the next document onwards. But don't forget to click the OK and apply tab before going to the next setting, because if you don't do this, the setting won't be saved. The next thing comes the document setting. This setting actually pertains to the document. So here you can set the size of the document to A4, or all these sizes are possible. But of course, you can go to the custom size, and if you want to do a custom documentation, you can give a custom size. And then if you are going to give a custom size, you need to give out the exact width and exact height of the custom document. So when you're taking this custom route, you ensure that you know the exact dimension of the pages you're working with. So right now, the default is A4. And then orientation by default it is portrait. You can have a landscape if you want. If you are building a digital atlas or a book which contains a lot of pictures, it really makes sense to orient it in the landscape. And then the units, for example, we saw the units being displayed. So for every scroll of wheel mouse, the document jumps by 40 points. So this is actually the measurement which the entire software follows. So you can choose the unit of measurement by choosing millimeter, by choosing inches, whichever you are comfortable with. But I will stick on to points because this is what the printers almost all the printers are familiar with. So they will always give out their values in points. So let it be points. And then here, margin guides. This is where you set the margin for the document. So this is actually the white space which will be available on the left side. And then this is the white space available on the right, and the white space available on top and bottom. So these spaces are sacrosanct. You cannot draw a text box or a image box above or beyond this line. So you can have a margin. This margin really helps when a binder attempts to bind the printed book. So that is the reason why we give out this margin. Then next comes a setting called bleeds. So bleed is actually the space beyond which the printer's ink bleeds. So this is usually given on all the four margins of the document. left, right, top, front, bottom. So what is here ideally what we can do is, the rule of the thumb is you give out a 3-point space for bleeds so that the ink, the printer's ink can diffuse into that area and make it look good. So here you see a link. Supposing you disengage the link, you have the choice of adjusting this value for each of these boxes, left, right. But if you link it together, what happens? If you give out a 3 here, all the other boxes take this value. If you give out 2, you see all the other boxes also becomes 2. So now the default value of a bleed happens to be 3. So now I am going to give a OK. Let me go back. This is where we are working. So bleeds. So we can always say apply and go. See here in the document layout, you have the choice of a single page layout, you have the choice of a double page layout, you have a choice of a 3-fold layout, and you have a choice of a 4-page layout. So these things you can set as per your requirement. And then if it is a single page, the first page is, this is actually grayed out because there is no other page. If you give out a double-sided page, it asks you which is going to be the first page, whether it is going to be the right page or the left page. Invariably, when you open a book, you see the right page happens to be the first page. So that is by default it is chosen. And then here autosave we have enabled. So if you enable this autosave, what happens is whatever document you are working on gets automatically saved by the software, and then the interval on which interval during which every time, say you are working on a document, this document, if you set this interval, say 10 minutes, every 10 minutes the software attempts to save the documents you're working on. So you can reduce it. If you're feverishly working on a document, it makes real sense to reduce this interval of autosave. And then here undo and redo. Here usually by default, anyone who's working on a document or any other software, it gives you the option of undoing what you've already done. So here all these undos and redos, this actually needs some memory for the software to save these things. So if you have done correction inside the software, if you have created a text frame and then you want to undo that creation of text frame, so that thing should have been already saved in the memory for you to do undo and redo. So here you can give the number of the history, how many times you worked on how many instances of corrections or new instances you have created inside the document. By default it is 20. Supposing if you're sure that your resources are pretty high, you can give out any number you want so that you can undo and redo the entire work any number of times. But before giving out or increasing this number, you ensure that your system has adequate resources. Always click apply before proceeding further. Now next comes the guides. Here guides are nothing but lines seen on the workspace. So guides, where the software wants to know where exactly the guides needs to be placed. So it is going to be in the background, it should never be in the foreground. And the snap distance the distance from the margin should be around 10 points. And the grab radius, supposing you create a text box or an image box, when you grab and pull it across, every time you pull, it moves along a radius. So the default is 4 points. If you want, you can change the grab radius. And then by clicking here show guides, the guides will be shown here. And then show margins, the margins will be shown here. And then I've already told you these settings will take effect only in your subsequent document, not in the current document. That is the reason why you're not seeing these guides and these margins now in this document. And it also gives you the choice of setting the color of these guides, because it will create a lot of confusion if you set the same color for guides and margins. So it always makes sense to add red to the margins so that it will look different from your guides. Then page grid is what? Small squares which resembles a graph paper. So that is actually page grid. And then there is always a default spacing between these grids, major grid and minor grid. Major grids happens the space small, it will divide the pages into small squares resembling a graph paper. So you can set the page grid. You can make a major grid is 100 points, so each square will be 100 points, and within that square there will be 5 squares of 20 points. So that is a minor grid. So it will more or less resemble a graph paper if you enable this show page grid. So major grid is a larger square, and the minor grid is a smaller square within it. So you can always change the color of these major and minor page grids. Page grids really helps you to accurately place objects on a document. Suppose you want to accurately place an image in the desired place you want. These squares ensure that you place it at the correct spot. Now, this is something called show baseline grid. Supposing you check this show baseline grid, what happens is this baseline ensures that all the typed letter are on that line. You can consider this to be a ruled notebook. So a ruled notebook has 2 lines, and you are supposed to write within that line when you are doing something, when you're writing on a ruled notebook. So it's better you check this box show baseline grid, so that all your type setting, all your material you type will be on that line, and your document will look more organized. And now there is baseline grid. There are some settings which you can adjust as far as baseline grid is concerned. That is actually normal baseline grid will be around 14.40 point, and the offset, it doesn't need offset. No, the current printers can accommodate a 0 point offset. Is something you leave a space on all the sides so that the printer will grip the paper and do the printing. So we are not going to give any baseline offset. So I am going to give apply. Before going to the next menu, always you ensure that you give out apply. Then next comes the typography. See here, this is the size of the letters, and the size of the letters, the displacement. Supposing you are going to type a subscript. Supposing if you are going to type a subscript, this can set the amount of percentage of space you want the letter to be below the major letter. So this displacement can be increased or decreased. Supposing by increase this displacement, your typed character will be 33% lower than that of the major character. That is a subscript. Then scaling. So any subscript should be smaller than that of the main font. So you need to scale it. By default, your subscript character will be 66% of the size of the main font. And then superscript, you all know what a superscript is, the script which is above the main script. So here in superscript, get the displacement. You ensure that you give out the same value for subscript and superscript so that they will look uniform. So the displacement of superscript is the space above the main script the letter is going to take, that is going to be 33%. It's going to be 33% above the baseline of the main script. And then scaling, again it should be 66% of the size of the main script only. So ensure that both these values are the same, and then you tweak around these values so that your document appears the best for you. So this is actually the customization is your choice. And then underline. So suppose you want to underline a word, you have the choice of displacing the line, how far you want to put the line below the word. So that we have given it a auto here. This is a default is auto. You can give it any value you want. So you can give it any value you want. So you can increase, you can decrease, you can make it auto. So this is a good possibility. So you can always give it auto. Then displacement, strike through. Suppose you want to use strike through with this on a word. Again, you can give out a percentage of elevation above or below. So that you can set here using the strike through setting. And then the line of the strike through which you use again can be changed. And then same thing with underline. You can usually you have the choice of changing the width of the line which you used to underline. So it's always better to use a auto, but if you feel that you need a thicker line, you can always set here. And if you want more displacement when you underline, that again you can put the value there. And then small caps. Supposing you are fond of using small capital letters just to attract attention. So small capital letters by default, if you use a small cap, it will be scaled down to 75% of the normal capital letter. Supposing if you use a small cap, by default, if you decide to use a small cap, it will be around 75% of the normal capital letter. And then when you are using a small cap, the line spacing, actually another important aspect in your document, will be around 20% of the normal line spacing. So that again you can set here inside these preferences. Now let's go to tools. Tools is where you set the first thing is the fonts. You can set the default font. If you don't set this font, the default value is going to be regular Arial. So when you start typing on a document without setting something in the tools, the type letter will take the font, the Arial regular, and then it will take a default font size of 12. The text color will be black. The text stroke is going to be black. There won't be any fill color. There won't be any stroke color. And the tab fill characters, the character which you want to enter by pressing the tab, that will be none, and it will be a single column document. That is going to be a single column document. The shading, everything will be a default. And then here tab width, again you can set here every time you press the tab, you want the page or space in the document to move by 36 points. So you can increase this, but the default is every time you press the tab, your Scribus moves 36 points in the document. Then columns is 1, and if you want to have more than one column, you can set 2 columns, and then the gap can be increased as such. Supposing you change the font, say for example Arial bold, you are getting a preview here of how the font will look like. So again, I wish to caution you, whatever changes you make in the preferences is going to take effect only in your subsequent document. If you want to make changes that will immediately be executed, you need to go to document preferences, which we will discuss later. And now the next happens to be the image. Image is actually where you put the image inside a image holder or a image frame. So what exactly you mean by free scaling? Free scaling is actually when you scale one side, the other side also scales. But whereas if you drag an image in the horizontal direction, it enlarges only in the horizontal direction. It does not maintain the aspect ratio. So if you put free scaling, you have the option of enlarging the image or resizing the image in either a horizontal or vertical direction. And the scaling per se, if you want to scale it horizontally 100%, vertically 100% is the default value, you can set it to any value you want. And then if you check this box, scale image to frame size, what will happen is whatever image you are importing into the frame will be automatically scaled back to the size of the frame. So that you can do. Then you can use a frame color of the box in which you are going to hold the image. That can be changed by using filling color. And then when you are using a shading, you need to know where the embedded colors are there. If you want, you can use the path to where you have stored the details. If you are working on that aspect, you can always select this. And then preview screen, the choice of normal resolution of the images or a full resolution of the images or low resolution of the images are given to you. If you want a full resolution preview, your system should be very high on resources so that it will immediately display. So supposing if your system is low on resources, you have the choice of choosing the low resolution preview. The normal resolution preview is whatever resolution you have chosen, it will display the normal resolution that you have the option of setting in your images, that we will see later. Then hyphenation is actually connecting to, supposing you're typing a word and then you're going to the next line, but only half of the word is typed. So what happened? There is one hyphen is given and it is continued to the next line. So here hyphenation really makes a document looks pleasing. It looks, the dimension of the document and the type setting all look very good when you use hyphenation. So here you can choose hyphenate the text automatically during typing. If you choose this, what happens is when you start typing, the text automatically hyphenates. If you choose this hyphenate suggestion, what happens is it will suggest you the optimal what are the possible hyphenation options are available that you can do. And the default language is going to be English, and the smallest word you want to hyphenate happens to be 3 characters. Supposing if you want to hyphenate a 7-letter word, and so the smallest it will be broken down to 3 and 4. So that's the smallest word is happens to be 3. You can even increase it or decrease it. And then consecutive hyphenation allowed. Supposing there are 2 different words and you want to hyphenate, consecutive hyphenations are allowed for 2 words by default, but you can always increase this value if you feel like. Now coming to the font. So actually this is where the types of font which is available for the Scribus to use are listed here. And then there is something called font substitution. Suppose you want to substitute one font with the other, you can give out a font substitution. Automatically what happens is if the font when you import a document into Scribus, if the font is not available, Scribus will automatically choose the nearest similar looking font which it has and substitute it. Supposing if it substituted some fonts, it will give out the font substitution here. And then additional part, supposing you have fonts stored elsewhere, you can always give out the additional path for those fonts to be displayed here and made use of. So that is as far as the font is concerned. Now let's come to the printer. So actually if you have a printer connected to it, so it will list the printer. So if you have a printer connected to it, it will list the printer, and the settings will be as per the requirement of the printer. Suppose you are using HP laser printer, it will automatically choose a setting as per the requirement of the printer. So here these are all defaults which you set as per your printer specificity. And marks and bleeds, here these are all default settings for the printer. Supposing if you want to have crop marks, color bars, all these things, registration mark, bleed mark, these will be set as per the printer's demand. These marks, printer marks, are a need for professional high-speed printer and not for home printers. So that is the reason why it is not giving out any value for this printer. Then next comes pre-flight verifier. So what happens is after you have completed the document, it needs to be verified before sending it to print, because when you print a document, all the layout should look similar. None of the letters you have typed should go out of the page. All these things should be looked into. So that is done by a pre-flight verifier. This is actually a PostScript verifier. Here, don't give out ignore all errors. What happens is if you give ignore all errors, it won't report any errors. So what you do is you check out all these boxes. The most important is the lowest allowed resolution. So mind you, for all the images to look great on printing, it should have at least a 300 dpi value. That is the minimal value for an image to look good on print. So the minimum value should be 300. But if you want the image to look good on a soft copy, 144 dpi is okay. But if you want to give out the same document for printer, you ensure that this value is 300 and highest can be anything. You can go higher than 2400 dpi. The higher it is, the quality of printing also will be really good. So this setting you need to give. If you don't give, so suppose you give this setting, if your document contains a image file under this value of 144 dpi, your software will immediately say pre-flight check failed, because you have a image with a lower resolution than the specified one. And then check for placed PDF files. Here in Scribus you have an opportunity to place PDF files directly into the document. So you can check for the PDF files, and then if you have imported in GIF images, again if you give check for GIF images, it will be checked automatically in place. And then if you have created a dynamic PDF or active PDF, there could be annotations, there could be fields. So if you check that, it will check for all the annotations, it will look for fields. These annotations should be excluded from the print, and then ignore non-printable layers. If you check that and ignore non-printable layers, what happens is the layers which cannot be printed will be ignored. The layers which cannot be printed will be ignored. So if you're having a multiple layer on a single document, supposing if some layers cannot be printed, so if you ignore non-printable layers, means what happens? It will attempt to print all these layers. So you need to be very careful in checking this box. So don't check this box, leave it as default, and then check for visible printable mismatch in layer. Again, if you work on layers on the page, you should ensure that you think twice before checking this box, because if you have marked your layer as visible, and then you have not you say, for example, in my previous lecture on layers, I have told you how to make the layer visible, how to make the layer invisible. If you check this, there will be two boxes, one saying check for visible, make it invisible. So if you make it invisible for the monitor, if you not check the printer to make it invisible to the printer, this mismatch should be shown to you. So if you don't if you check the make the layer invisible in your monitor, and don't check the make it invisible in printer, the layer which you want to be invisible will be made visible on the printer and it will be printed. So I would request you to go through the previous video wherein we have discussed on the concept of layers to have a better understanding of these two settings. Then color management. So here I have not activated the color management. So supposing I activate the color management, I get a lot of profiles. So this, to set these profiles, you need the interaction with your printer. So you need to ask him what sort of system profile his printer is capable of doing. By default, this is given out as default. You have the choice of changing these default values. You should contact your printer for setting up all these preferences. And then rendering images, you can render it into all these things are highly technical issues as far as the image rendering is concerned. Perceptual is a most common setting wherein whatever is rendered should be seen by you. So that is what it is all about. So that is why we are giving out the value as perceptible. And then solid colors, again these are the color values which you need to input from the printer. And then simulate printer on the screen. Again, if you have a printer connected to the system, the driver is installed, you can give out this offer. What will happen is it will simulate the document, assume that it's printed, and it will display the simulation to you. And then PDF export. Here you have the choice of exporting all your document as images or as PDF. Supposing you want to export your document as PDF, you have the choice of exporting all the pages or exporting only some pages. Supposing you want to give out some pages as sample for your book, you can choose those pages and make it into a PDF and show the sample, send the sample to others to view. And then there's something called clip printer margins that you can always do. If you want to make the document look tight, you can use the clip printer margins to do it. And then compatibility of the PDF. So minimum happens to be PDF 1.4. If you're going to use active PDF, you choose interactive PDF, you choose 1.5, that will be better. If you want to generate thumbnails, if you give out thumbnails, what happens is when the PDF document is open, on the left side thumbnails of the pages will be beautifully displayed. And then saved linked text frames as PDF article. Supposing you have linked one text frame with that of the another text frame in the next page, if you click this box, what happens is it will show as PDF articles. And then if you are given out bookmarks, include bookmarks, that will make your PDF include the bookmarks. And then resolution for graphics. Supposing you're exporting this document as graphic files, the minimum resolution I've already told you should be at least 300 dpi for the printing to come out well. And then compression method we have given out as automatic. But if you want it to be an image file, you can use a lossy JPG or lossless zip you can do, or you just best is automatic. Then compression quality you give out maximum so that the file size will be reduced. And then maximum image resolution you are not choosing because it can be anything. The more the resolution, better is your quality of printing. And then next setting is security. So supposing you are giving out a document, you don't want others to carry out any edits on the PDF document. So for that to happen, you can enable encryption, and here what happens, you can password protect the edit rights. So if you give out a password for the owner, unless and until you give out the password, nobody will be able to carry out any edit of the file. And then if you so desire, you can password protect your PDF document itself, so that any user who wants to view the file will have to give out a key in a password which you are given, so that you have the choice of encrypting. And then here there are further settings. If you click this box, you can allow the user to print the document, and then here allow changing the document. I don't want the user to change the document. Allow copying of text and graphics. Supposing you are given a PDF file and which contains documents and graphics, if you just don't allow copying text and graphics, the right click will be disabled, control V will be disabled. They won't be able to copy your text and graphics. And then allow adding annotation and fields. Supposing if the user wants to annotate for his further reference, he can always add annotations and fields, comments, anything can be done. That let us permit. And then the color. So the output. So output, what you want this output to be used as. If you want to use the output to be viewable on the screen or on the web, choose that. If you want to output to be sent to a printer, choose this output. And then if you want the output to be black and white, choose gray. So here, since we want to push this document to internet, let the setting be screen and web. And then convert spot colors to process color. This is actually composite colors can be broken down into spot colors can be broken down to composite colors to enable the color printer to work on. And then you can choose a color profile if you want, provided you know the printer's requirement. And then you can, for as far as the image is concerned, you can, if by checking this box, you can go ahead and ask the printer to give out this color profile for the printer, that you can include here. And then pre-press is what you see before you send it across to the final printing. So you can printer marks, you want to display the crop marks, bleed marks, all these things just for proofreading. Supposing if you give out these crop marks will be printed there, so you'll know exactly where the paper is going to be cut, where the ink is going to bleed, on the page information, all these things, registration mark, everything will be displayed, so that when you are doing a proofreading, you will know exactly where exactly the document is going to be cut, where exactly the ink bleed has happened. All these things will be clearly seen. Page information again will be displayed on the printed document. Then let us come to document item and attributes. Supposing here you want to add some item attributes to a document, so you give out an add and then type. So here I want to create an automatic table of contents, so I give out TOC. And then now here for table of contents, for creating auto create table of contents, you need to give out attributes. So here the first thing is I have given the name as table of contents. Type I am not going to specify anything. Then value I am not going to specify, parameter nothing. And then automatically I am adding it to text frame. So when you add it to text frame, what happens is whenever I create a text frame, I right click on the text frame, it will give out the option of add to table of contents, so that if I'm going to have automated table of contents, so I can always right click on the text frame and add the text frame to the table of contents. So I will advise every one of you, when you're creating a document, always put the header in a single text frame. Don't draw a large text frame and put the heading also there. So ideally speaking, if you want the heading to get into the table of contents, you create a separate text frame to hold the headings. So that what happens is you can right click on that frame and add that alone to the table of contents. If you have created a large text box and you have drawn the imported the text into the text box along with the header, if you click the text frame and say add to the table of content, the entire contents of the page will be added. So that is the reason why I am giving out this warning. So I will give a apply to this attributes and then table of contents and indexes. So here this is where you add the table of contents. Table of contents you can add, you can change the name of the table of contents here. The same thing will be displayed and then attribute name. So I am going to link this table of contents to TOC. So now we have already created an attribute. Now the table of contents is related to TOC and page number placement is can be in the beginning, can be in the end, and can be need not be shown. So I am going to put it in the end. So I am going to give a apply and then keyboard shortcut. So this is where you can do a lot of tasks by using this keyboard shortcut. Suppose you want a new document, you need to go to file and click new. All you got to do is press control and control key and end together. It will automatically create a new document. Suppose you want to create a new document right from the template, all you got to do is control alt and these are some of the shortcuts, keyboard shortcuts, which is already available. You can change the shortcut or you can also create a new shortcut. If you have been working on a previous version of Scribus and you would have already created some keyboard shortcuts and you would have saved it on as a single file, you have the choice of importing those shortcuts to the newer version of Scribus 2. So now there's something called scrapbook. Scrapbook is nothing but where you store your repeatedly used text and images so that you can recall these images and these texts at in any page when you're working on. You need not go back to the folder and keep on importing the same image and text repeatedly. So if you send your copied items automatically to the scrapbook, it will be held in the scrapbook and you can reuse it anytime you want by calling the scrapbook. You need not go to the original location of the file. Again, keep copied items permanently across sessions. This is again what happens if you're working on a document. You will be working today, you will be working tomorrow. So all the copied items, if you want to store inside the system, your system should have adequate resources. So again, keep the copied items permanently across session. If you really check this, all the copied items will be kept inside the scrapbook, and the number of copied items you want to store again in the scrapbook is your choice as per your system capacity. Next comes the display. So display is actually what you see on the screen. If you want the page display, as you can order the page to show the frames, to show images, to show rulers, show text character, all these things, you show bleed area, show page show. So these things can be defaultly given. And then scratch space is nothing but the gray space here, gray space here. So this is like the workspace. The gray space on either side of the workspace is the scratch space. So usually by default the scratch space will be to the left and right will be around 100 points and above and below will be around 20 points. You always have the choice of increasing this scratch space. So what exactly you do with the scratch space? You can draw and keep an image here before you draw and put the image into the document. All the things you want to put inside, objects you want to put inside the document can be placed here and dragged and dropped into the page. So this scratch space serves that purpose. So you have the choice of increasing or decreasing the dimension of the scratch space. Then there is something called gaps between pages. So supposing you have more than one page document, you need to create some gap between these pages. So horizontally you need not create a gap because these pages appear to be stuck with each other. That is what you desire when you author a book. But as vertically there should be some gap between those pages, and by default it is going to be 40 points. You can increase or decrease as per your requirement. And there is something called adjust the display. So here if you want to adjust the display, say right now it is 96 dpi. If you increase the display size more, what happens is your page also enlarges and your print, you can more or less, by making it 100%, you can simulate how your page is roughly going to look like when it will be printed. So right now it is around 196 dpi, ideal is 100. And then let us go to colors. So again, the fill color and normal frames, you have the choice of coloring your text box as well as the image frame. So here, these frames, all the frames, you can normally by default you can give out a color. So if you want to give a border to the page border will be defaultly colored red. You want to change the color, and then the filling of the page will be white in color. This is what you see. Normally the frames will be drawn frames will be black in color. If you select the frame, the selected frame will be red in color, and then if you group 3 or 4 frames together, the group frames will be shown in green color. And then if you lock a frame, the locked frame will look like this, the linked frame again will look red in color. So you have the choice of changing the colors for various aspects. And then annotation, if you give out annotation for the set of words, again that will be blue in color. The control characters, text to use, again will be in red in color. So these are the choices you have when you address the display settings. Then let's go to external tools. So here, these are the tools which are linked to your Scribus and which is commonly used inside the software. So these should be installed separately. So for example, now we have installed a PostScript GhostScript. GhostScript is, we installed GhostScript before installing Scribus. That you will see in the how to install Scribus video. So here the GhostScript, this is the path for the GhostScript file, and then the resolution is default is 72 dpi. And then image processing tool, again you need by default GIMP is the default image processing tool. You can always go ahead and install GIMP, and the moment you install GIMP, the default folder will be indicated here. So I have not installed GIMP yet. If you install, as soon as you install GIMP, it will be shown here. And then the configuration here, you can use LaTeX. LaTeX I have already installed. LaTeX is nothing but if you want to create scientific documents with notations and scientific notations, you need LaTeX for. So that document can be embedded using LaTeX. Then if you are interested in embedding musical notation, you can use Lillipond. All these things are a possibility. Then let us go to miscellaneous. So here, these are all miscellaneous settings. Here, if you check this box, always ask before fonts are replaced when loading a document. So what will happen is, if the font which is imported from another source, if the text imported from another source, the same font is not available inside the system in which Scribus is working, it will optimally attempt to replace a close match font which is available. So here, if you check this box, it will ask permission from the user, asking whether it can use the closely resembling font. If you give a yes, it will replace. And then preview of current paragraph style visible when editing style. We have not come to the exact aspect of styles as such. So style is nothing but you work on the type of paragraph. The look of paragraph can be preset in the styles. So when the preset styles are being edited, there should be a preview available, so that how the preset is working before the edit, how the preset will work after the edit. So both should be available. So for that to happen, you need to check the box. So here, Laurent lump sum is actually the font type of font which is available. If you check this box, it always uses standard Laurent Ipsum type of font. And then plugins. These are all the plugins which are available, ready to be used inside the Scribus. The short words is actually which are commonly used in other languages. Some of the short words are here, which is available, seen here. So you can use these short words, keywords, and then use the same key to get these results. Scripter, supposing, as I have told you, you can make the scripts work inside Scribus. So for that to happen, you need to create a script in a language which Scribus understands. Python is the commonly used language. You can use C also, C or C++. It's your personal choice. Now this is as far as settings, preferences goes. Before I conclude, I still re-emphasize that whatever settings you give out under these preferences will take effect in the future documents only and not in the current document.